it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I am really excited to be sharing the Flower Friends stamp set from Clearly Besotted with you today, as I'm going to create a slimline card and I'm going to make a scene with these adorable little hippos. So in today's video, we're going to cover quite a few different techniques, including Copic coloring, some ink blending, glitter paste, and we're going to use all these things together to make a really sweet card. So I have the Flower Friends stamp set here, and I'm going to use all of the hippos from this set and also the bumblebees. So I'm going to start first by inking up the stamps with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I'm also using the We Are Memory Keepers Comfort Craft silicone stamp pad holder. It is almost like a suction. It's silicone and it suctions onto the back of the ink pad, and then you can use that to hold your ink pad as you're inking up your stamp. It's a super handy little device that I've really liked using lately, and it works great for helping hold that ink pad so you don't drop it. I'm going to Copic color my hippos first, and I used very simple Copic coloring throughout this project, and I repeated all of the coloring as I colored every single piece throughout these images. So for all the greens, I colored them with the same 3 colors. Yellows, I did the exact same thing, and so on and so forth. And I kept the shading really simple. I start first with the lightest color, add the darkest color, then bring the medium shade if I'm working with a medium shade, and I bring that in after the darkest color, and then finally I bring in the lightest color once more and blend over everything. Now for something like the hippos, I only used 2 colors, so I started first with the darkest color and then blended that out with the lightest. I also wanted to give these cuties a little bit of rosy cheeks and some cute pink on the front of their face and their bellies. So I used some really light R markers to help me do that, and I really feathered the lightest color out as best as I could so that way it kind of faded off into the white. Leaving white areas really helps your images feel more dimensional because it gives them a highlight area. Now, if you aren't fading out to white, I would fade out to your lightest ink color, which happens to be here on these pink flowers, the lightest pink marker. So I started first and colored the whole flower with the lightest pink marker, and then brought in the 2 darker shades to add the shading. But that light area was really well maintained, so that way the flowers feel dimensional and we get some nice contrast. Once I had all the coloring completed, then I went ahead and cut the images out. Those are set aside, and we're going to work on creating the scene that these hippos are going to sit on. I have this scene building stencil from Simon Says Stamp and also a Raindrops stencil, both from Simon. I have them linked in the video description if you want to check them out. They're also over on the blog. I'm starting by ink blending through the scene building stencil first and creating a hilly ground for them to sit on. So I masked off other areas of the stencil that I didn't want to get any ink through, and I'm just focusing on this slope piece that I have. And I used 2 different shades of Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated Ink to ink blend the hills. I also used 2 different brushes to help maintain some control as I was ink blending. Once I did the grass, then I moved on to the sky. I want there to be some raindrops in this scene because, April showers bring May flowers, and I thought this would be a really fun way to kind of mimic that on my card. So I'm starting first by taking Marine. It's a Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated ink, and it's the lightest of the trio of blues here. I'm using a small blending brush to ink blend that color as well as Cadette and Royal through the stencil. And I'm not coloring every single raindrop completely with the ink blending. I'm kind of sporadically coloring them because I want some raindrops to be lighter and some to be darker. So we're getting a little bit of variation here, and you can see now that I took the stencil off, you can really see how that looks, and it makes the raindrops a bit more interesting. I'm going to repeat the ink blending by shifting the stencil over and just going ahead and coloring in the rest of the raindrops on the other side of the card. Once I had the raindrops colored, I brought in my larger blending brush and just added a little bit of shading around the outer edges of this panel. I will trim this panel down a little bit for the finished card, but I did want a little bit of color in the background just to help kind of give the look of a rainy day. To further mimic that, I'm going to also use the clouds from the Scene Builder stencil, and I'm going to ink blend the largest and the smallest cloud in that stencil to create some rainy clouds in the background. Now, because the positively saturated inks aren't completely opaque, we can still see the raindrops, especially the darkest ones, through the cloud stenciling, which I think is great because it really makes it look like the raindrops are also behind the clouds and also in front. So it creates some nice depth on the card. And so I'm just going to repeat the stenciling across this entire scene until I have a total of 5 clouds created on my card. Once I have the clouds finished, I brought that raindrop stencil in again. My plan is to add some glitter paste over top of the stenciling of the raindrops to give them a little bit of sparkle. So I'm going to use this Stickles glitter gel, it's a clear glitter gel, and apply that with a small palette knife. This is more of a trowel, and that's going to allow me to maintain some control as I'm applying this paste because these are small areas. I don't want to use a larger palette knife and get paste where I don't want it. So I'll shift the stencil over again because of course we had shifted our stencil earlier when we did the ink blending. So we need to make sure we do the same thing for the raindrops going over on the other side of this panel. So once I realign the stencil, I'll bring my paste in once more and apply that through the stencil on the other side of the paper. This is a skim coat, so it really won't take that long to dry. If you apply it a bit more thicker, it might take a little longer. But mine was dry fairly quickly. I would say within an hour, I was ready to work on assembling. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm gluing my little hippos down onto my scene with foam tape. This foam tape is from Scrapbook Adhesives. It's a nice thick adhesive and it gives these hippos some nice depth off of the card. I also brought in a Copic marker that I use to color in the leaves, and I'm going to use that to help me ground these hippos so they're not floating in midair. I don't like to have my images just kind of hanging out on top of a scene. I like to ground them, but that's just me. You don't have to do this. Of course, those little bees, we couldn't forget about them. I decided to use foam tape and I just cut them into small pieces and popped those little bees around the scene. Some of them I even put on top of the flowers. I'm bringing in some embossing ink now from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm stamping one of the sentiments from the Flower Friends stamp set onto black cardstock. Then I'll use white embossing powder to go ahead and sprinkle that on top, and then my heat tool to set the powder. You'll know the powder has been set once it turns from a little bit of a dull look to something shiny. I'm going to glue that sentiment on top of my hippos and kind of put it at a little angle. It always makes things look a little more fun. And then finally, I brought in a few fairy jewels from Memory Box to add to the centers of the flowers. I chose both pink and yellow. And that's going to complete this adorable spring scene using the Clearly Besotted Flower Friends stamp set. I absolutely love how this card turned out, and I loved that because I made this on a Slimline card, I got to use all of the hippos from the set because honestly, I wasn't going to be able to decide which one I wanted to use because I loved them all. Alright friends, well if you enjoyed today's video, I hope you will give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for additional inspiration. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back very soon with more to share with you all. But until I see you again, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye!